Amatakwepe, Mima Lakota. Imaganta hão aqui existe hoje, pai, que lê recapa aqui. Lilo wakan. Mitaki é até Tashunka Witko Tios pai. Mitaki é ina Wambli Zuya Tios pai. This is a traditional greeting of my people that I am bound to give, albeit it's a short version. What I said in my own language translated into English thusly. Hello, my relatives. I am an Oglala Lakota, and I come from our very sacred holy land, the Black Hills, where Yellow Thunder Village is. My mother is from the War Eagle clan, and my father's family is from the Crazy Horse clan. This greeting is to this day the way all Indians throughout the nation still greet one another, those that still know their culture. This is the only way we present ourselves to one another that is acceptable. We tell you who we are, where we are from, who we are from, our clans, and we do this without ever saying our name. Anything less would be an insult to you and to my people. Senators, my morning prayers to the great mystery always include you and your colleagues in Congress, as well as leaders in all governments. It is an honor to come before you as a spokesman for my people, the American Indians of the United States of America. In these United States of America, this great country of ours, we American Indians, we can be anything we want to be, except American Indians. And that is created by the laws of this nation and condoned by its subsidiaries, the so-called tribal government, and designed for the Indian to fail, to be expendable, to be eliminated. I take you back in your history. After the American Indian hostiles had been subdued and forcibly confined to Indian reservations, it took approximately 30 years, one generation, for us to adjust and become economically viable. Contrary to what the anthropologists say and what we even ourselves are taught as Indian people. However, allotments were made smaller, our remaining lands were open to homesteading, and we were forced into reducing our livestock. Nevertheless, we made the adjustment again in less than half the aforementioned time. "15 years and become economically self-sufficient again. But once again, the American Indian was forced into reducing our livestock. The boss farmer concept was instituted. We were told what, when, where, how much, and how little we could grow. This applied to agriculture and our livestock. Again, we recovered in a time span of approximately 15 years. We were so successful in our third recovery that the American Indians enjoyed the finest of economic times, while the rest of the industrialized world was wallowing in the Great Depression. It was then that President Roosevelt introduced the Howard Wheeler Act, better known as the Indian Reorganization Act, the IRA, which institutionalized the so-called tribal governments, which are not one of our institutions, and it is still foreign to us this very day. We have yet to recover. 45 years later, the IRA, Indian tribal governments, on their own initiative, began renewed efforts at reestablishing their sovereignty focused on the oldest profession of American Indians. That's gambling. Bingo and other gaming operations has been, without exception, a proven initial success. Failure through mismanagement, politics, or litigation has been less than 15%. Showing a better than 85% success rate, the new Indian-sponsored gaming industry on reservations dwarfed success ratios of any and all other non-Indian industries in America. Gaming operations have proven to benefit the revenue gathering of all governments, be they county, state, or Indian reservation. With regulation of bingo and gaming by the Congress, we are experiencing repetition of history. One shouldn't remedy success. The results? The United States government, through Congress, once again intervenes to regulate a proven success in violation of all basic and fundamental rules of economics and totally contrary to all the laws of capitalism. American Indians are human beings. We are supposed to be citizens of the United States of America. We fought in your wars in other countries. Our Navajo Nation code talkers served and saved this nation in World War II. We have the inalienable right to joint venture with whom we choose, as long as we do not harm nor commit fraud upon anyone. There is no piece of evidence anywhere that proves Indians ever conspired with criminal elements to establish bingo. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, the infamous colonial office of the Department of Interior, and the initiator of sleaze in government, has been regulating contracting on Indian reservations since 1824. This fact alone should convince and teach every student of government that regulation of commerce and enterprise does not work. In fact, it only produces the opposite result. Graft and corruption is rampant to the contracting auspices of the BIA and its surrogate tribal government. Indian front contractors bid for and receive government contracts only to proceed to build shoddy, dangerous bridges, buildings, schools, roads, and dams. The Indian is the scapegoat when there is a failure and is always the one indicted. Contracting on reservations has proven historically to breed and feed corruption within the BIA and now the tribal governments. Within the past 2 years, I personally have attempted to assist 7 Indian reservations located in the Southwest, the Northwest, and the Northern Plains, to no avail. The investors I represented were from various groups interested in establishing banks, resorts, Indian-owned public relation firms, factories, fishing ports, and international trade. I now know that tribal governments do not want economic development unless graft is a major ingredient. The BIA is a major player in land leases being sold by petty bureaucrats for as meager an amount as $40. There is a scandal of monstrous proportions occurring in at least 2 Indian agencies, the BIA's branch of land operations and the branch of realty. I challenge this investigations committee to intricately go into the branches of realty and land operations. The BIA does not enforce its trust responsibility, quite to the contrary. In September of 1987, I moved from the poorest county in America, the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, to the richest area in the country, the Navajo Indian Reservation. There is no difference. I paraphrase the former Secretary of the Department of the Interior, James Watt. If you want to see an example of failed socialism, go to an Indian reservation.
This is a maroon way of peeling coconut in the jungle.
Let's see it.
Picky bo.
Right now we are in the John Crow Hills, deep in the Blue Mountains of Jamaica, and things are about to get super interesting.
We're here at the Scots Hall Maroon Town, and the Maroons were originally escaped slaves who carved out autonomous regions within the hills of Jamaica. We're meeting up with Colonel Pink, who's the leader of this community. He's going to share more about Maroon culture and what makes them unique in Jamaica.
The Maroons are descended from West African slaves brought to Jamaica by the Spanish. They escaped slavery and fled to the mountains to live off the land with the Taino Indians.
But their numbers surged in 1655. When the British invaded Jamaica, the Spanish abandoned their plantations and more slaves escaped to join the Maroons in Jamaica's isolated Central Mountains.
When the British tried to take control, the Maroons fought 2 guerrilla wars, eventually forcing the British to recognize their autonomy and establish their freedom in the late 1700s, more than 50 years before the British abolished the slave trade and over 200 years before Jamaica's independence.
I am Colonel Rudolph Pink, and you're in Scotsall, Maroon Town.
My name is Rodine Rose, right? I am one of the captain of the Scotsall Maroon Town.
My name is Gart Matux and I'm one of the captain and dancer.
My name is Kishana Robinson and I am one of the drummer. Thank you.
My name is Marco, and I'm one of the Vaga brothers. And
And I'm Alex, and I'm also one of the Vaga brothers.
nice to meet you guys.
And just to explain some more about a Maroon Town, right? Remember back in the day, most of our foreparents were enslaved by the Spanish. You know, we come from Africa, so we know much about the bush and about guerrilla warfare. We are the only people that forced the English to come and sign a treaty with us. We were the first independent people of Jamaica. We the Maroon.
Is that a warning to the farmer up there saying it's you guys, it's okay?
Well, it's
Something-
just signal that, well, there's no harm.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no harm.
Oh, wow.
No threat.
So when we were coming up the valley, you guys were blowing that.
Oh yeah, to clear the road, make sure we keep all the way clear. Meaning you signal the community that there's visitors in the community, and you know they don't need to be worried about nothing at all. Everything is all cool.
That's so cool.
You get a very diplomatic escort
Yeah.
by the Maroons, the Maroon warriors.
Yeah, that's so cool.
In Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, there lies a cemetery for Creek Indian freedmen, the tribe's former black slaves. It's neglected and becoming a dumping ground.
Yes, this is one of the Benjamins. Yes, this is one of the Benjamins. Yes, this is one of the Benjamins.
When Rhonda Grayson first heard about it, she didn't get very far in her inquiries about who owned this plot of land.
When I received the second call, I said, this is the ancestors calling us, and we have to do something.
Not only did she find the owner, she managed to acquire the land on behalf of the Creek Indian freedmen. Now she's begun work on restoration and an accounting of who's buried here.
This is Rebecca Johnson, born July 4th on Independence Day, 1865.
At the recent commemorations for the centenary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, black Native Americans were a strong presence. And as with the massacre of 1921, many in the US and elsewhere aren't even aware of their existence. Some Native American tribes long accepted black members, but in what's now Oklahoma, white settlers judged the tribes civilized because not only did they assimilate with the newcomers in dress and religion, but also in the adoption of black chattel slavery. After the Civil War, the tribal nations abolished slavery as part of treaties signed with the federal government in 1866. Former slaves would be fully integrated and now known as freedmen. And there was full integration and intermarriage. Ligas Chotu Perryman even served as the principal chief of the Creek Nation between 1887 and 1895.
We know that America Cohee was born in 1888. She is an original enrollee of the Muskogee Creek Nation.
Rhonda Grayson's great-grandmother lived her whole life as a member of the Muskogee Creek tribe. But then, in 1979, the Creek passed new laws decreeing that freedmen were no longer tribal members. The other tribes followed. Freedmen would lose their tribal voting rights, as well as their housing, health, and other benefits.
Everyone should be outraged that this could happen in 1979.
Tribes argued it was an expression of their sovereignty. An 1866 treaty with the U.S. government should not be the final say on who was a member of their tribes. They should be.
Sovereignty is fine, but sovereignty does not give you the right to discriminate against a people, and that's essentially what's happening.
Grayson, who's been leading efforts to overturn the new laws, sees other motivations.
It's about greed and it's about racism is the core of the entire issue. That's it.
Efforts to pressure the tribes to reverse their exclusionary policies have been successful in the courts. In 2017, the Cherokee Nation was forced to abandon plans to expel its freedmen.
Cherokees are people, and unfortunately in this world there's still people who are racist. I think the vast majority of Cherokees are not.
The U.S. Congress is getting involved, threatening to withhold funding if other tribes don't reverse course. And it seems to be working. Some say they will open a dialogue on the issue. But it is fraught. On the face of it, the federal government is overtly intervening in tribal affairs. However, since a Supreme Court ruling in 2020, the tribe's arguments for excluding freedmen have become shakier. The Muskogee Creek tribe argued for autonomy from the federal government. Its basis, the 1866 treaty with the federal government. And the tribe won. But it's that same treaty that gave freedmen full rights as tribal members.
Bioma Edwards.
The Creek are Grayson's tribe, and she's determined that freedmen members, both living and dead, will soon be able to reclaim their identity. Shia Bertansi, Al Jazeera, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma.
So dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
This is the Danza de los Diablos, or the Dance of the Devils. It's performed on South Mexico's Pacific coast, the region with the country's largest concentration of Afro-Mexicans.
No es de la África la danza.
These dances don't come from Africa, they are Mexican, but these instruments are African and we make them ourselves. Now the black people have united with the local culture and mixed with the local people along this coast, and we multiplied, and there are now many black people here.
This country is home to more than 1 million Afro-Mexicans, yet these are marginalised and often forgotten communities. They represent around 1% of the national population. Mexico's 2020 census is the first ever to include Afro-Mexican as an ethnic category. Mexico's legacy of slavery began hundreds of years ago.
The slaves in Mexico were in the places where there was mining. This town was founded around the year 1800, most likely by fugitive slaves who escaped to the coastal regions where they could survive on what they found here.
Today, that original African culture still exists in a state dominated by indigenous tradition. Yet this stretch of coastline between Oaxaca and Guerrero states is an impoverished part of the country. There's not much tourism here, and local industry doesn't extend far beyond fishing and agriculture. Yet few black Mexicans leave to seek better opportunities, and those who do find the wider country not very welcoming. Indeed, for Rosa Hernandez, the lead councillor of Santo Domingo Armenta, the Afro-Mexican experience is isolating.
We're a vast minority in this country, so that's why many people have never heard of us. They think we're from another country. They don't consider you to be Mexican simply because you're black. But we are Mexicans, and it's only fair that they recognize us, that they value us as much as anyone else.
As the Black Lives Matter movement around the world seeks change and equality for Black Mexico, the challenge for these communities is still at the point of showing they exist. Alistair Baverstock for CGTN, Quahiniquilapa, Mexico.
Initially friendly, relationships between the Aztecs and the Spaniards became hostile, as the latter took the Emperor Moctezuma hostage and killed many local nobles. But now the great city of Tenochtitlan is in open rebellion, and the forces of Cortés are stuck in the middle of a hostile city. Yet the Spanish conquistador has more tricks up his sleeve. The bloody battle that will decide the fate of millions will soon reach its conclusion. Rocks were flung into the building from nearby roofs, and the Spaniards' quarters were repeatedly set on fire. Cortés sent Moctezuma to the roof of the building to beg for peace. His own people pelted him with rocks. The sources disagree here, but Moctezuma either died from his wounds caused by the rocks or was strangled by the conquistadors. He no longer served a purpose. The Spaniards noted that the Mexica did not fight at night. So, during a rainy night on the 1st of July 1520, later called La Nocte Triste, the Night of Sorrow, they attempted to flee. As the bridges had been removed, Cortés's men constructed a portable bridge to cross. Most of the expedition had crossed when they were spotted. The drums of war on top of the Great Pyramid were sounded. The retreat quickly turned into a panic. The entire causeway was then under attack from innumerable canoes. The bridge was broken. Half the Spanish Tlaxcalan army was thrashing in the water. Many of the soldiers and the horses, the cannon, and much of the gold was lost. Bodies began to fill the gaps in the causeway, and men had to run across their fallen comrades. Cortés himself fell in the water, but was rescued. The Spaniards eventually managed to crawl to the mainland. During La Nocte Triste, 3/4 of Cortés's men were lost. It was the worst defeat suffered by Cortés. His native allies lost thousands, but he could still continue fighting and retreated to Tlaxcala to lick his wounds. However, the Mexica could hardly celebrate. Tenochtitlan was badly burned, 2 kings of the Triple Alliance were dead, and the nobility had been wiped out. Cuitlahuac was quickly elected emperor and tried to organize further counterattacks against the Spanish. He offered a perpetual alliance to the Tlaxcala, and this offer caused divides within the Tlaxcalan leadership. However, another deadly weapon soon aided the Spaniards. One of the men had smallpox. Within a year, 40% of Tenochtitlan succumbed to the disease, along with its new emperor, Cuitlahuac. Farmers lay dead in their fields, famine hit, and tribute stopped coming in. Cuitlahuac was succeeded in Tenochtitlan by his cousin, Cuauhtemoc. While he was being crowned, Cortés was planning something that hadn't been seen in the region since the rise of the Mexica: a siege. He would choke and starve Tenochtitlan. One by one, the smallpox-weakened cities around Tenochtitlan fell to the Spanish Tlaxcalan forces. Soon Tenochtitlan and its neighbor, Tlatelolco, flooded with refugees from destroyed cities, stood alone. With the city now surrounded, Cortés began planning for a siege. Using the now Spanish-controlled Texcoco as an arsenal, the Spanish built 12 flat-bottomed brigantines. Due to recent reinforcements, the Spaniards numbered about 90 horsemen, 120 crossbowmen and arquebusiers, and several hundred footmen, alongside 3 large and 15 small cannons. According to the sources, the number of native allies was anywhere from 50,000 to 500,000. Cortés had more than enough allies for labor and fighting in the upcoming siege. He organized his forces into 4 divisions, 1 on the water and 3 land divisions, which would be captained by Pedro de Alvarado, Gonzalo de Sandoval, and Cristobal de Olid. Each had around 30 horsemen, 14 crossbowmen and arquebusiers, along with 250 footmen, alongside thousands of native warriors and laborers. Alvarado would assault via the Tlacopan Causeway, Olid via the Coyoacan Causeway, and Sandoval via the Iztapalapa Causeway. Cortés commanded the ships. He knew that taking the causeways and securing water control were the only ways to take the city. On the 22nd of May 1521, the captains left for their respective causeways. Once in position, Alvarado cut the great aqueduct at Chapultepec, forcing the Mexica to drink from the few fresh sources within the city. Cuauhtemoc had allowed the Spanish Tlaxcalan forces to take up positions around the city without much of a fight. He had learned that fighting the Spanish on open ground was far too disadvantageous. On the 1st of June, the Spanish ships sailed out into the lake. Reinforcing this armada were apparently 16,000 war canoes under the Texcoco general Ixtlilxochitl. Cortés used them to assault the Mexica intelligence center at Tepepulco. From there, smoke signals informed Tenochtitlan of the Spanish movements. Thousands of war canoes launched from the canals in Tenochtitlan smashed against the ships. The overwhelming size and firepower of the brigantines proved too much, and soon established dominance over the lake. For the following weeks, little progress was made. By day, the conquistadors tried to fight up the causeways towards the city. War canoes on their flanks, wooden spikes planted in the causeway gaps, and thousands of Mexica warriors hindered their progress. Each day, the Spaniards would withdraw back to their camps on the mainland. Each morning, they awoke to all their progress undone and new gaps dug. In an attempt to break the stalemate, Cortés planned an assault with the goal of piercing deep into the city. On the 10th of June, he ordered Sandoval and Alvarado to fight as hard as possible up their causeways and move towards Axayacatl. Cortés and Olid, with 200 infantry and thousands of natives, marched from the Xuluc causeway with naval support on their flanks. The fighting was heavy throughout the day. Native allies worked furiously to fill the gaps in the causeway. Ships rained fire down upon the defending warriors and canoes, and by the afternoon Cortés's division had reached the Gate of the Eagle. Cortés charged into a plaza, set up a large cannon, and began to fire into the mass of Mexica warriors challenging them. They took control of the temple precinct rapidly, but soon the war drums atop the Great Pyramid sounded, and it became clear that a great host of Mexica warriors were on the way. By foot and canoes they swarmed the precinct and assaulted Cortez's division. Cortez ordered a full retreat, leaving behind the cannon, which the Mexica pushed into the lake. While retreating, Cortez ordered the men to burn as many buildings as possible to remove cover from which the Mexica could fire down on them and to flatten the ground for cavalry. Sandoval and Alvarado made progress up the causeway but could not push into the city. While the assault failed, it did change the minds of some neutral native city-states. More allies began to join Cortez's cause. With more native allies, the work to fill in the canals could be done quicker. Unsettled by Cortez's progress at filling in the causeway and pushing into the city, Cuauhtémoc ordered the bulk of his people into the precincts at Tlatelolco. Cortez maintained this strategy of slowly filling in the causeways, moving inch by inch into the city, and burning and destroying what he could before retreating. Patience was the key to victory, not rash action and recklessness. De Alvarado, though, could no longer wait. He decided to take half of his cavalry and push forward up the causeway. The charge broke the Mexica defenses, and the Spaniards chased them into the city. It was a trap. Soon the Spaniards were among houses, surrounded by a horde of warriors. Their retreat was cut off by the canoes. Pursued and trapped, they had no choice but to try and wade through the water. Some impaled themselves on spikes planted there, others were captured, and many others were chopped down by the Mexica. Few managed to escape. Cortez was furious and traveled across the lake to personally scold Alvarado. But after noting how far Alvarado had managed to get, he decided that a concentrated push to the Tlatelolco marketplace should be their goal. Other factors were also pressuring Cortez to try more desperate measures. Food and morale were getting low, and the Mexica had learned how to attack the ships. Numerous Spaniards had been dragged from the ships and some of them destroyed. Control of the lake was now challenged. On the 30th of June, Cortez pushed up the southern causeway in a massive assault and pushed into the city. Then he divided his forces into 3 groups, each tasked with taking one road leading to the great marketplace in Tlatelolco. De Alderetti's group made rapid progress towards the marketplace, shoddily filling in gaps over the canals as they went. As they neared the marketplace, the Mexica sprung an ambush and the Spaniards were forced to retreat across the hastily filled canals. But their bridge was too narrow. Cortez, hearing of the disaster, rode to assist. The fighting was so chaotic that all Cortez could do was pull drowning men from the water, but most of them were being pulled up from the other side by the Mexica warriors and dragged off. In the chaos, Cortez was seized by the Mexica, and only the quick actions of his footman, who sacrificed himself, saved him. A few dozen Spaniards and thousands of native allies had died in the fighting, with dozens of Spaniards taken alive. From their camps, the conquistadors could see their comrades dragged up the pyramids in the city and their hearts offered to the gods. This completely demoralized the conquistadors and their allies. But that soon changed. A Spanish ship had docked nearby, bringing crossbows, horses, and desperately needed gunpowder. The bitter back and forth started again, with the filling of canals and the fighting on the causeways. It seemed, however, that with each passing night, the Mexica rebuilt less and less. By now, the city was suffering from extreme starvation, and the people were forced to drink the salty lake water. Now Cortez was able to make permanent progress into the city. The allies who were used to fill the gaps now served as warriors. During the final days of July, the Spanish instigated a series of surges into the city that pushed the Mexica further into the Tlatelolco marketplace and surrounding precincts. On the 27th of July, Alvarado finally pushed into the marketplace and killed those left defending it. Cuauhtemoc's last-ditch effort to push back the Spaniards was to elect a sacred Quetzal warrior. Placed in a ceremonial costume, covered with resplendent feathers and made to look massive by way of wooden frames, this warrior scared the Spaniards. Pushing through, this warrior is said to have captured 3 men at once and dragged them to Cuauhtemoc for immediate sacrifice. The Spaniards began to withdraw, and Mexica morale increased as the Quetzal pushed further. But this final act of valor could not turn the tide of the siege. As reported by native sources, the warrior dropped from a terrace, never to be seen again. The Mexica could fight no more. Starvation had wrecked the city, disease had taken hold, and women and children were filling the ranks of the Mexica army. Cuauhtemoc knew the city was lost. Alvarado's men pushed into the final holdout in Tlatelolco on the 13th of August. There they caught Cuauhtemoc in a canoe, hoping to flee the city to raise the Mexica banner elsewhere. After he was seized, Tenochtitlan fell silent for the first time in 2.5 months. A great city lay in ashes, and the Aztec Empire was at an end. But modern Mexico had just been born. Gold and silver flowed back into Spain, along with what are now modern food staples, such as corn, chocolate, vanilla, and chili. The conquest of Mexico saw the first great meeting between the old and new worlds, and the events that took place during it changed the fates of both worlds forever.